Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast. My name is Chris.
And my name is James.
And we are the Formula One Bros.
Just two twins with a love of F1 to share our thoughts on everything in the world of Formula One.
And we are here after we are recording just after the completion of the third and final day of preseason testing. We've seen all the cars on track. We've seen the RB19. We've seen the McLaren's floors, which were blurred out in a promotional video. We've seen all the cars. We've seen everybody run. And starting on Monday, it's race week.
It's race week. We're so close. We're so close.
1 week from today, we'll be qualifying for the Bahrain Grand Prix.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And I tell you what, my mental health has gone way up now that cars are on track. And F1 is about to start.
And the fact that, sunset's at 6 o'clock now, not 4:30.
Yeah, so that's also nice.
But yes, knowing Formula One is back,
big plus.
Big, very, very big plus. Just like Switzerland's flag.
Yes.
Just like Switzerland's flag.
All right, so what we're going to be doing for this episode, we're going to give just some brief overall impressions of how testing went, and then we're going to do some preseason predictions. We're going to predict who wins the teammate battle for each team, how we think the constructor standings are going to shake out, and then who we think is going to be crowned Drivers' World Champion and Rookie of the Year. Mm-hmm. So without anything else, let's go ahead and get into it.
Well, right away with winter testing, I have to say in recent years, this was probably the smoothest and most efficient winter testing that we have had. It kind of had to be because it was only over 3 days. Usually it's, it's been like 6 days, either at one place or two places between, Spain, Bahrain, or wherever. But it was very, very efficient, very smooth. Not a whole lot of incidences. A couple cars, breaking down, a couple DNFs, but that's normal for preseason testing. Nothing too alarming, I should say.
No.
I think the only alarm bells that I can think of are, for McLaren. But that's just going to be because, following similar situations from last year. But yeah, overall it was a pretty decent test. A couple surprises, which we'll talk about later, but I think it was very smooth testing. Very smooth.
Yeah, not nearly the number of retirements or anything, especially last year. I feel like, I think comparing it to last year is tough just because we had the new cars and we had no idea what to expect and everything was new. And this year, everything is pretty much, there's a lot of carryover from last year. So it wasn't as, I don't know, it wasn't as intense. It wasn't as,
Yeah, they had a lot more to go off of for winter testing this year than they did last year because the cars are no longer new. They're the same cars as last year with some slight differences, but it's the same cars from last year. So a lot more information to go off from testing, and it seemed like at least most of the teams were solely focused on the problems that plagued them last year.
Lots of correlation testing.
Yes, lots of correlation testing.
Especially with Ferrari. They did a ton of... I don't even think they got even a proper qualifying run in.
Yeah, I don't think they did.
Because they were doing lots of long runs, lots of correlation. And Charles Leclerc even said on Friday that was pretty much the only thing that they did.
Yeah, they were also messing around with setups and how the car reacts in different setups. And both Ferrari drivers, Carlos and Charles, both said that it's in the different setups, it's way more drivable than last year. And that was already a pretty darn good car last year. But so there are a lot of positives from Ferrari.
Yeah. We'll get on to Ferrari in a second, but I think the biggest thing coming into testing was Lance Stroll having an accident during training. Apparently he's broken both of his wrists. Which is not good, and Fernando Alonso.
Not good at all.
Fernando Alonso has said that has definitely hurt the team, and that he is missed. And we're just wishing Lance Stroll all the best.
Yeah. Felipe Drogovic was kind of thrown in there, very last minute,
but he did a really good job.
He did do a good job. He did do a good job, but having both, not having both drivers doing testing is definitely a setback. But we'll talk about Aston Martin situation later, but at least if it was last year, I would say that would be a really bad situation, but it wasn't that too terrible. We just hope Lance Stroll is okay.
Yeah, definitely hope Lance Stroll is okay, and I'm glad that Felipe Drugovich got a lot of running, because I think if Lance is not in for the Bahrain Grand Prix, I think putting Felipe Drugovich in is going to be the best thing for that team.
Oh yeah, and now he's done testing on that track,
so he knows it. He knows how to, Anyway, getting into some more overall impressions, I think the biggest and most unifying thing is that Red Bull emerged as the favorite.
Yeah, they definitely are the favorite. They didn't finish at the top for lap count or anything like that, but Red Bull definitely looks the strongest. They had probably one of the smoothest testing for all of the teams. It was a dream test for Red Bull. They were very strong.
Yeah, they didn't have any issues, and watching them go around the track, I think the biggest thing about testing is not lap times, which usually they finished up at the top of testing, and Sergio Perez did have the fastest time of the whole test. But I think even more telling for that team was just how the car handled, especially the turn 9 and 10 combination, the downhill braking double apex. That corner sequence is the easiest tell for whether or not you have your car hooked up or not, and that Red Bull looked flawless through those two corners every single lap that they went through there.
Very good.
It just looked like a dream to drive. The lap times came super easy to them. It didn't look like they were pushing at all. It was very reminiscent of like Mercedes 14, 15, 16.
Yeah, absolutely. Another really, really big thing from testing is Williams. They were second in lap count this year. They had also very, very strong testing, very smooth for them, and they were able to just run a lot of laps. And we said before, lap count is the biggest tell of how at least from testing, how the teams will lay out, and Williams looks so much significantly improved from the past several years. Last year was already a significant improvement for them, but that was really, really awesome to see them leading the way for most of the weekend, them leading the way for lap count.
Yeah, I definitely agree. They had 439 total laps, just shy of AlphaTauri's 456.
Which that was also a big surprise too.
And well ahead of Ferrari's 417. So they put in a lot. Logan Sargent looked like he was doing really well and getting himself bedded in.
Yep.
And both drivers setting top 10 teams, or top 10 times, throughout their respective sessions. I think it went as well as anything could have for that team. And even if they're still last in constructors, I still think that they will be a lot closer, and I think they will be able to be a lot more competitive this year.
I highly, highly, highly doubt they will be anywhere close to how slow they were in 2019. I truly think that this is such a right step forward. It just so happens that there has to be a team that finishes last. It might be Williams, but they should be very, very happy with how much improved that car is.
Yeah, I think we chatted a little bit about Ferrari, but I think the biggest question mark in testing was how the Ferrari's power unit was going to fare compared to last year. And it seems like it's improved a lot. I think that Valtteri Bottas's retirement today on the last day was a little bit worrisome for them. But, I mean, Mercedes also had George Russell's power unit go out from a hydraulic failure. Renault has had problems with Alpine has had problems with the Renault power unit. So I think, the only power unit that didn't have any problems was the Red Bull Powertrain's Honda. But I think, so I don't really think it's that of big of a concern.
Let me ask you this. What was the nature of Valtteri's retirement? Was it an engine failure, or was something else on the car?
I do not know what specifically, but the way that the team made it sound that it was a part of the Ferrari power unit. It wasn't like last year. Last year's retirements were due to ill-fitted water pumps. That was the biggest thing that plagued them, and that plagued them all throughout the year, was the water pumps and all the cooling. That's that plagued them. I think it was something within the power unit, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know exactly what the nature of that was, and I don't want to speak incorrectly about it. But, I mean, even then, I think the biggest tell for me that I think the power unit is improved is that they were the fastest down the straights. They had the fastest... hey, buddy.
Yeah,
we have a guest to the podcast.
That was something that was really, really nice to see, is the fact that the Ferrari power unit was the quickest in straights.
Yeah, they were at the top of the really speed trap times.
And something Charles mentioned, one of them, I couldn't remember if it was Charles or Carlos, but one of them mentioned the fact that with the setups, a big focus for Ferrari this year was making sure that the car worked well in different setups.
Yep.
And it seems like with all the setups, they were able to keep up corner speed and stability in the corners, which I think is a really, really great thing. Not only is reliability fit, I think, improved a lot, but that aspect of as well. And it seemed like Carlos said in an interview that all of the tests that Ferrari had done for reliability, that they reached all of the checkpoints and they reached all the checkpoints and everything that they needed to with testing the reliability.
Yeah.
So I think that's also very, even though they didn't have the most laps done or anything like that, but that's definitely good for Ferrari.
For those listening on Spotify and not watching on YouTube, James is laughing because his cat is crawling all over me currently. And he's a
very curious
unexpected guest of the podcast. He's sniffing the microphone right now. But yeah, so overall, I think testing, it's because there were only 3 days of running, it's still very hard to tell. For me, it's still hard to tell what the overall pecking order is going to look like. I think that will be a little bit more evident come FP1, FP2 in Bahrain this time next week.
Once we actually get into a race weekend, I think that'll be that's when we'll really see what the pecking order is.
For sure, yeah. All right, so that's it for our overall impressions. So let's get into some preseason predictions.
Ooh, preseason predictions.
This is
can't
always
wait to be wrong.
This is my favorite episode because I can't wait to go back in November and watch how wrong we were.
Oh, I know.
So my first preseason prediction, and I think this is something that you also talked about, was that Aston Martin will be the team that actually closes the gap to the top three. It's going to happen this year, and between the midfield and the top three, and it will actually become a top four with Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, and Aston Martin, all mixing it in for podiums.
I know. Like 2 weeks ago, I said that it was going to be Alfa Romeo that was going to get fourth.
You're already wrong.
I'm already wrong. I know, like, after seeing how strong Aston Martin was, I knew that they were going to be improved because there was a lot of, like, chatter going on amongst that team over the winter, over the off season. I don't think anyone anticipated how strong they were. So I definitely think that they are going to be best of the rest this year.
Yeah. And I think we're not the only ones that think that. I think journalists are not the only ones that think that. I think they have the top three worried. I think, there were even Red Bull personnel that were saying that they will even be competitive with Mercedes and Ferraris and potentially eclipse one of the two. I don't think it's going to go that far. But I definitely think that
Red Bull likes to say a lot of stuff. So.
Yeah, I definitely think that they are poised to really mix it up with the top three.
Yeah,
and
I agree. I think that there could be some podiums, especially with how good Fernando Alonso is. I think that there definitely could be some podiums.
Yeah, I definitely want to see Fernando Alonso back on an F1 podium. That would be special.
Yes,
I don't know if they're going to be competitive for race wins, but I think they. I have every reason to believe at this moment in time that podiums are within their reach.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. Another one, actually, well, that would be in one of the other categories, so I'll talk about that later.
I think another prediction that I have is that the number of overtakes in a season will once again increase. Last year they increased by over 200. I don't think it's going to be that much this year because the cars are pretty much the same, but I think the reason why I think it will still increase is because I think the midfield has gotten more competitive and closer.
Yes.
So I think we'll see an increase of around 100 overtakes on the season.
Which that actually kind of reminds me, one of the other predictions. I wholeheartedly think that the gap between the top teams and the back is going to be a lot closer this year. I really do think that this will be one of the most competitive seasons, if not the most competitive season that we have seen in a long time. Similar to that of, let's say, 2012.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to quite be at 2012, and I think 2012 will forever live on as one of the all-time great seasons of Formula One, just like, up there with, James Hunt, Niki Lauda, 1976, those sorts of things. But I think it'll definitely be more competitive. I 100% agree with you. So with that, we're going to start getting into some other stuff. So we're going to go into predictions for who is going to win the teammate battle for each team.
Yes.
And we're going to do this in reverse order of the Constructors' Championship from 2022.
Which means we start with Williams. Yeah, I'm going Alex Albon with that. I think Logan Sargent will be a very strong driver. I think Logan will be better than Nicholas Latifi. But I got to go with Alex Albon. He's been in Formula One for quite a while now, and he's already a very, very strong driver. So I'm going with Alex Albon. On that one.
I definitely agree with you there. I'm also going with Alex Albon. And again, it's just because Alex Albon is so experienced. He's already had a year in the team. We know how rated he is as a driver. It takes rookies, a while to bed in. I mean, just like Yuki Tsunoda, he's entering his third year in F1, and I think he's just now starting to come into his own. I think he really started to at the end of last season. So, it takes rookies a while. And so I think that it'll definitely, Alex Albon will definitely have the upper hand. But again, like you said, anything is an improvement from Nicholas Latifi, and so I think Logan Sargent will be competitive from the get-go. That brings us to AlphaTauri. This is a tough one, I think, for me, but I think I'm going to go Yuki Tsunoda.
That's tough. It's tough because Yuki Tsunoda, this is his third year, but Nick DeVries is a Formula E champion, and we already know he's a very, very strong driver. Oh, it's tough. I'll be a little bit bold. I'm going to go Nick DeVries. I'll be a little bit bold. I'll go Nick DeVries.
I think I stuck with Tsunoda just because I think his experience is going to carry him. I think there's a level of consistency that comes with experience that I think is going to be hard for Nick DeVries to attain. And I think Nick DeVries will have his weekends where he's quicker than Tsunoda. He's going to have his weekends where he finishes ahead of Tsunoda. But I think just the consistency that comes with experience is going to be something that can't be knocked away.
Yeah.
So that's why I've gone Tsunoda. All right, next up, that brings us to Haas. This is also another tough one because I think this is their most experienced driver lineup that they've had. Because when Roman Grosjean was with the team, Kevin Magnussen was still fairly new to Formula One. Because his Magnussen's first year in Formula One was 2014. Grosjean's was 2012.
Yeah.
So I think this is
Nico's was 2010.
Yeah, and so I think now that Nico is on board with Kevin Magnussen is a lot more experienced. I do think that this is their most experienced driver lineup. So this is tough, and I think I'm going to go Nico Hülkenberg.
See, I'm probably going to go Kevin Magnussen. Mainly it's tough. It's close for me. It could go either way. I'm going with Kevin Magnussen because Kevin Magnussen did a full season. Nico Hülkenberg only did one race.
2 races.
2 races, excuse me. He did 2 races last year. So he's definitely had experience in the car, but Kevin Magnussen has had a full season in the car, so I'm going to go Kevin.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to take Nico Hülkenberg. It's definitely going to be very close, but I think I'm going to take Nico Hülkenberg just because I think once it's not going to take him that long to get bedded into the team and acquainted with the new cars. And I think when that happens, I think he just has a level of consistency that Kevin Magnussen hasn't really ever had. Mm-hmm. And so I think the consistency is going to carry them. And I think when points are on offer, I think Nico is going to be the person to go get them. Mm-hmm. So after Haas comes Aston Martin. And I think this is going to be a pretty easy one. Fernando Alonso. Yeah.
No other explanation. It's Fernando Alonso.
Yeah. Fernando Alonso, he's still incredibly motivated. Mm-hmm. He still drives like he's 23.
Yeah.
He is
very much has a lot of fire left in him.
Still aggressive, and I just think Lance Stroll is not nearly as consistent enough to go toe-to-toe week in, week out with Fernando Alonso.
Lance Stroll isn't a bad driver. He's just not nearly as consistent as Fernando Alonso. That's the thing. Fernando is extremely consistent.
The only teammate that Fernando Alonso has ever had beat him was Lewis Hamilton. Mm-hmm. So I don't see Lance Stroll being able to compete with him. So I think it's going to be.
Well, didn't Esteban Ocon finish ahead of Fernando last year?
He did, yes. Now that I'm thinking about it, and I want to put a very lightly shaded asterisk over that, just because it seemed like whenever Alpine had power unit problems, it always happened to Fernando.
Yeah.
And it happened a little too much for me for it to be a coincidence, I think.
Yeah.
So I think
put our 10 hats on.
Out and out, pace wise, the only person to have beaten Fernando Alonso, I think comprehensively enough to say that he is quicker than him, is Lewis Hamilton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So after that is Alfa Romeo.
I'm going Valtteri with that one.
I think I'm going Bottas too.
It'll be close, another close one, because Zhou Guanyu is already proved to be a very good driver, and he can only hopefully improves a lot from last year, which I think he will. But I'm gonna go Valtteri.
Yeah, I'm also going Bottas. He's just so quick in qualifying that I think Zhou definitely did a great job to bridge the gap to Valtteri last year. I think, I would say by the end of the season they were fairly matched in pace, but I just think Valtteri he's so quick in qualifying that I think he's just going to have the upper hand on Zhou this year.
Yes, I agree.
After Alfa Romeo, that takes us to McLaren.
Ooh, it's tough. I think. Actually, no, it's not tough. It'll be Lando.
I think Lando too.
It'll be Lando. With everything that happened with Daniel Ricciardo last year, they were consistently just setting up the car for Lando. Not really. And I think they'll be doing the same this year, unfortunately. I hope they don't shaft Piastri the way that they did Ricciardo. But Lando is their driver. So I definitely think it'll be Lando taking home the battle there.
I also think it's going to be Lando, but I don't think that McLaren had as much of a hand in Daniel Ricciardo's performance as I think it has been made out to be, and it certainly seems that a lot of McLaren fans think that it is, or Daniel Ricciardo fans think that there has been. I think with McLaren, I think the way that they handled his contract was definitely not, in any way correct. But at the end of the day, Daniel couldn't compete in a car that Lando could. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what drove a lot of their decisions. And I don't fault McLaren or Lando Norris.
Oh, I definitely don't fault Norris at all.
No. I don't fault McLaren for wanting to give their guy a really good car. I think they did everything that they could to help Daniel Ricciardo early on, but it comes to a point where, you can only help somebody so much before they have to help themselves. And so I don't really fault McLaren for what happened with Daniel Ricciardo. But I do think that Oscar Piastri is going to find more success.
Speaking of, can I pause real quick? I learned something that when Sebastian was let go from Ferrari, Christian Horner had told Sebastian, "Well, why don't you just come back?" And Christian Horner said had he waited just like one more month, Sebastian Vettel would be still in that car.
Could you imagine?
Sebastian Vettel going back to Red Bull?
Back at Red Bull, that's insane.
I found that out yesterday, and that's nuts to me.
Yeah, and Sebastian Vettel
Absolutely
would probably
nuts.
still be racing, knowing he's racing with a world champion team.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's
Anyway,
pretty crazy.
Yeah. Back to the topic.
After McLaren is Alpine, and this is a tough one, but I
Esteban
think I'm
and
going to go
Pierre.
with Esteban Ocon.
I think I'm gonna go with him too. Not to say that Pierre isn't a good driver. I think
No,
this
not
is
at all.
another one. It'll be close,
Mm-hmm.
but Esteban has experience in that car,
Mm-hmm.
and Pierre doesn't.
Yeah, he's Esteban's the team person.
Yeah.
He knows everybody there. He has the experience in the team. He knows that car really well, much more than Pierre does. And I think that, yeah, again, Esteban Ocon just has the upper hand, and I think that will manifest itself earlier rather than later, but it will manifest itself, and I think that's going to be how the beginning of the season goes for that Alpine pairing is going to determine who ends up on top at the very end of the season.
Yeah.
So after that, we get to our top three. So we finish up with Mercedes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually even though last year it was George Russell, I'm going to go Lewis Hamilton this year.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Lewis.
Because Lewis Hamilton basically sacrificed his season to, while George Russell was up there banging in top 5 after top 5 after top 5, Lewis Hamilton was the one that was doing the work on all of the alternate setups to collect data and to help make that team better, because that's what you do. And I think Will Buxton said it best in testing, that is the ultimate reason why Lewis Hamilton is not a world champion, because he is the fastest car. And I've said this the entire time that you're in Formula One. You're a world champion because you end up in the best team. You push that team to be even better. You get the best people surrounding you because of how talented you are. And I truly think that Lewis Hamilton is going to bounce back this year, and he is going to wow us. Do I think Mercedes as a team and as a car is going to be more competitive? No. But I do think Lewis Hamilton is just going to be at another level this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and again, not to say that George is not a good driver, but I don't see Lewis getting beat by a teammate 2 years in a row.
No, I don't either. I think last year was a fluke, and again, I think last year was intentional. He wanted to make sure that car was better. And I think from what I've seen in testing, it is. I don't think it's as good as Ferrari, but it is much better.
Yeah.
And speaking of Ferrari,
Charles.
I think Charles too. I think for me, I'm going to put this one at a toss-up. And the only reason why I say that is because Carlos Sainz, when he gets up to speed, he's very quick. And I think last year he had really bad luck at the beginning of the season, and I think that really put him out. His incident in Imola with Daniel Ricciardo, his retirement in Australia, lots of things at the beginning of the season. His retirement in Austria. So much bad luck very early on at the beginning of the season. But I think if Carlos can get off to a really good start this year, I think he can really, really take it to Charles.
Yeah.
But I think Charles is so consistent that I'm rating it as a toss-up, but I'm giving the slight edge to Charles.
I am too, and I think the reason why it's definitely a toss-up because Fred Vasseur has come out and said that there's no clear number one driver. They're just going to utilize the drivers as they see fit, based off of the situation. But So that's why I really do think, Carlos Sainz is a very, very good driver. Obviously, he is because he's driving for Ferrari. They're not just going to put some schmuck in the car who's had like a season. So I definitely think it'll be a toss-up because it definitely seems that there will be it'll be a lot more even because they're not going to prioritize one driver over the other for the entire season like they did with Charles last year.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely agree. And that takes us to our reigning world champs.
It's going to be Max.
Red Bull, I think so too.
I think Checo will close the gap to Max this year, because Checo has definitely, and it's unfortunate that he's had to do this, but Checo's definitely been really, really fighting for his seat at the table, and to make sure that he gets his seat at the table, he gets the proper portions and everything, and so I definitely think it'll be closer, but I have to give it to Max.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think there's no other driver on the grid, maybe Lewis, at this point that's better than Max.
I think at this point in time in Formula One history right now, Max is the best person on the grid. He's the best one. Mm-hmm. I think I give the edge to Max. But I will say, I think Sergio has been a lot more outspoken about making sure that, and I think Red Bull has realized too that it's important to give Sergio a car that he can work with as along with Max, because the way that Ferrari has improved, the way that Mercedes has improved, the way that Aston Martin looks to be looking. It's going to be really important that both drivers can get as close to the maximum that car can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a season where Red Bull can just run away with it and be comfortable.
Definitely not.
So they're gonna need Checo to be super competitive.
Yeah, and I really do think that Checo's performance is going to determine who wins the Constructors' Champion. Mm-hmm. I don't think that it's going to affect the Drivers' World Championship, but in terms of Constructors' Champions, mm-hmm. I think it can definitely turn the tide between Red Bull and one or two other teams.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a little bit of a pause there, and I will just mention we talked a little bit of preseason testing, and I will just mention that we'll go through the total lap counts for Red Bull just so you all know exactly where everything stands. Most laps, AlphaTauri, followed by Williams. Then we get into the top three teams. It was Ferrari leading the way in third place. Fourth was actually Haas with 415.
Yeah.
Fourth, just behind with 413 was Red Bull. And then you had Alfa Romeo at 402, Mercedes with 398. I think they would have been up there closer to the top had George Russell's power unit not had hydraulic system not had any issues. Mm-hmm. Then it was Mercedes, and after Mercedes it was Aston Martin with 387. And again, I think the struggles that they had on the first day put them a little bit behind the eight ball. And then ninth was Alpine, and 10th was McLaren, which McLaren have a lot of work to do ahead of them for the season.
Yep.
So with that being said, let's go on to how we think the Constructors' Championship will work itself out for the 2023 season. And we'll start at 10th. We'll go up to first.
Because I know we both have the same team.
Yes. In 10th place, I have Williams.
Yeah, we both have Williams. Now, I kind of mentioned it earlier. Put him in 10th because someone has to be last. Mm-hmm. I think Williams is among the teams that have improved the most. Mm-hmm. But don't quite know if it's enough to leapfrog them above whoever's going to be ninth.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they're definitely going to be the slowest, but they're not going to be the slowest because they're a million miles away from everything like they were in 2019 or even this past year in 2022. I really do think that they've made a lot of really good improvements. I think the personnel changes that they've made at the team are really good. I think Logan is going to be really poised to score some good points. And I think they will be regular contenders for the points. I think every team this year is going to be regular contenders for points. Yeah. So, but someone has to come in the last, and that would be Williams.
Yes.
In ninth, I have AlphaTauri once again.
I also have AlphaTauri. I think all the way through the midfield, it's gonna be very, very, very
tight.
close. And I think there will be moments where we'll see really, really great performances from each one of these teams in the midfield. But I think at the end of the day, the way that points will shake out and everything, I just think AlphaTauri will come in ninth. So I think AlphaTauri will be in ninth place.
Yeah, I think so too. I think had they retained Pierre Gasly, and if Pierre Gasly was still a part of the team, I would be more inclined to put them at eighth. That's no disrespect to Yuki Tsunoda or Nick DeVries. I think they have the best lineup that they could have hoped for with Pierre Gasly leaving. But yeah, I think AlphaTauri is going to be the most. I think them and McLaren are going to be the most kind of confusing and hardest to nail down, just because for them it's going to be their development. Can they keep up the pace with development? And everything that Franz Tost has said during preseason testing is that they can. It looks like they will be able to. So it'll be very interesting to see how AlphaTauri does this year. Yes. In eighth place, I have Alfa Romeo.
McLaren fans, cover your ears, because in eighth place I have McLaren. I just think with how much other teams have improved around McLaren, I just really, really don't think McLaren has made enough improvements. In fact, I wouldn't say they've taken a step back, but with all the other teams around them, I think they have improved the least amongst them. So I have McLaren at 8. I don't think it's going to be a very good season for McLaren at all.
The only reason why I don't have McLaren in 8th and why I have Alfa Romeo there is because I think with McLaren, they were competitive for 4th last year, even given how poorly they started. And I think there are going to be a couple things that keep them from being that low. One, I think Oscar Piastri is going to be more competitive than Daniel Ricciardo in that car.
Yeah, which I hope I'm wrong.
And two, it looked like a lot of the problems that they were having in testing were very, very similar to the problems that they had last year, which were involving the heat. And I think once they have that first major upgrade package come in and they get some more things in the pipeline, I think they will continue to improve. I've always said that this year for McLaren is just going to kind of be a stasis kind of year, a stopgap year for them, and I just don't see them sinking as far as 8th place, which is why I have Alfa Romeo there.
Yeah.
So moving on to 7th, who do you have?
I have Haas in 7th place.
I actually have McLaren in 7th.
Okay.
Cool. I think
pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close. I think for me, the reason why I have McLaren in 7th below Haas is I think with the Ferrari power unit being improved, they had the most single day lap count on their final day of testing. They had how many laps did they have? They had 172 laps, which is the most that any team did during a day during testing. And so they had a mega final day.
Yeah.
And which is why I have them above McLaren, and which is why I have McLaren in 7th. I also think that their driver pairing is going to be a little bit more consistent overall. We know how good Lando is, but the big question mark is Oscar Piastri.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've Haas in 7th.
In 6th, I have Haas.
I have Alpine. Now, I think for me it could be a toss-up with 6th place between Haas and Alpine. But I think, personally, Alpine will be above Haas just because I feel that their driver pairing the two of them is a lot more consistent. Both of them together are, I think, a lot more consistent. But it really could be a toss-up for 6th place in my opinion, between Haas and Alpine. But I put Alpine just ahead of Haas.
Yeah, I also did. I have Alpine ahead of Haas, so I have Haas in 6th place. And for all the same reasons, I have them. I I have them there. And just because, I mean, all the same reasons. So I don't want to get too much more into it. Fifth place.
You put Alfa Romeo pretty far down, but I have Alfa Romeo in fifth place. I have Alfa Romeo in fifth place.
I have Alpine in fifth place, and Alpine. I mean, all the reasons why you mentioned Alpine was going to finish ahead of Haas are why I have them in fifth place. I think they had an incredible year last year, and I think they're going to be very poised to continue. I think they're going to get overtaken by Aston Martin, and I think that's the only reason why they come in fifth.
Yeah.
For me, Alfa Romeo being as low as they were is just because they have been relatively inconsistent. They have been very unreliable. And I think the biggest question mark, again, is going to be the Ferrari power unit.
Yeah, which I think that they've solved a lot of the reliability issues. Now, we did see Valtteri Bottas did retire in testing, but I think a lot of their issues they have solved from last year. Which is why I have them as high as I do now. Remember, 2 weeks ago I made the prediction that they'd be fourth, but I'm going to say fifth for that one.
Yeah,
I'm going to say fifth for them,
and that's because we both have Aston Martin in fourth place.
Yeah,
I think we've already talked about them enough, but they were the biggest surprise of testing.
They were the talk of the
Hands
entire
down.
paddock. Everyone was making note of how significantly improved Aston Martin has, which is so good. It's just so good.
Yeah,
so nice to see when that team changed hands to Aston Martin. You know, in 2021 they didn't have a great year, and then last year they had a horrendous year.
Yeah.
Considering how good they were in 2020. But I think they're going to be they're going to make all that back up.
And I've always been rooting for that team ever since 2018 happened. I've always been rooting for that team. Force India has been an underdog team that has really punched above its weight class ever since it came into the sport. And you know, they had some sensational moments in the early 2000s, and you know, it's unfortunate what happened with Vijay Mallya basically running that team into the ground financially and being put into administration. And the way that they've bounced back for that in the hands of Aston Martin, I think is really special. And yeah, I think more people talked about Aston Martin's speed than they did Red Bull and how good Red Bull looked. Even though I think Red Bull is I think Red Bull is going to continue their dominance, but more people were concerned about Aston Martin, and I think that's really impressive. I, at one point, had them above Mercedes, but I'll get into that next, but I think they are going to be the team that bridges that gap.
Yeah. So, well, we'll go right into third because we both have Mercedes in third. I think Mercedes has closed the gap a little bit on the top two, but not a whole lot. But I think they're a lot more improved, but Aston Martin will be nipping right at their heels. But I do have Mercedes edging out Aston Martin.
I agree. I think the determination between Aston Martin and Mercedes is going to be, can Lance Stroll be consistent and stop crashing?
Yes.
And can George Russell stop crashing?
Also
stop crashing. I think the two of them, the performance of the two of them, because if the car performance of the Aston Martin is as truly as good as it is, and the performance of the Mercedes is as improved as they are, Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton are going to be business as usual. They're both going to be sensational. They're both going to be grabbing and, you know, having stellar performances. But I count on George Russell way more than I count on Lance Stroll.
Yeah, and that's really why I have Mercedes is purely for the driver pairing. I just think George Russell is far more consistent than Lance Stroll is.
And then on the other side of that coin, I don't have Mercedes overtaking Ferrari or Red Bull is just because I think the top three as a whole, the way that I see it, have all improved the same amount. I really think that all three of them have taken a very similar size step and fixed problems that they need. I think the Red Bull, you know, the drivability for Checo is better. For Ferrari, the power unit is better, and Mercedes, the overall concept of the car is improved. But that's why I still have them in third place.
Yep. So, second place.
This is constructors.
Is for constructors. In second place, I have Red Bull. But the only reason I have them in second behind Ferrari, the only reason is because I think Checo as a driver is not as good as Carlos Sainz.
Yeah,
That's what does it for me. Carlos Sainz, in my opinion, is better than Checo. He's a lot more adaptable than Checo. Now, Red Bull did kind of shaft him and not creating a car that was good for Checo's driving style. But when it comes down to it, I just don't think Checo is going to outperform Carlos. That's what's going to do it for me.
That's interesting, and I think the second, as it was last year, I think the competition between the number 2 drivers, Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez, is going to be the determining factor there.
Yeah.
But I am keeping Ferrari in second just because I don't think they've really improved enough to really eclipse Red Bull. I still think Red Bull is going to be the favorite every single time they turn up to a track. Now, again, I don't think we've really seen the full performance of any team during testing.
Yeah.
So we could get to Bahrain. I mean, we're already there, but we could get to FP1 and be completely proven wrong. But I
Aston
don't.
Martin constructors champion.
Yeah,
confirmed.
for real. Oh my gosh,
just kidding.
that would be insane.
That was sarcasm.
Lance Stroll, a part of a world champion team. Could you imagine that? Oh my god. So I just have Ferrari there because I just don't think that they've improved enough to really mix it up with Red Bull as much as they would need to. Now, again, a dark horse in that competition is not only their power unit, but I think their power unit has improved. I think another dark horse that needs to be considered is their strategy. They do have a new strategist. They have a new chief strategist. Their strategy department has been reorganized, and they have a new team principal, which Drive to Survive revealed that the buck always stopped with Mattia. Mattia made all of the decisions for that team. He was responsible for everything.
So it really was Mattia's fault.
Yes. So Mattia Binotto had a lot more burden to bear on Mercedes on Ferrari's lack of success.
Yeah. I could talk ages about that, but I was watching Drive to Survive. Now, Drive to Survive is very dramatized, and they cut and paste certain things, but it just seemed in the episode where they talked about Ferrari, it seemed like Mattia kept saying, we know we're making mistakes, but we're going to fix them. And then mistakes just kept happening.
And Charles also mentioned that Mattia is the boss. He's the one that makes all the decisions. He's the final answer on everything. So I think that having a new team principal and having a new chief strategist and reorganizing the strategy department can really be a dark horse for Ferrari that makes them as competitive as Red Bull.
Yeah. So in first place, another reason I just talked about with Ferrari, for me having Ferrari in first is the competitiveness of Carlos Sainz. But we'll talk about who we think I'll wait to say who I think the world champion will be. But I really do think that if Red Bull or Ferrari were to win the championship, I think it's going to be decided way later in the season.
Yes.
I really do think
agree.
that we could see a situation where it comes down to the final race. And I also do see a situation where it comes down between Carlos and Checo, determining what the constructors championship is.
That race is going to be, even right from the get-go, right at the beginning of the season, is going to be incredibly important to watch.
Yes.
And I have Red Bull in first, just because they're the juggernauts. They're the reigning champions. I haven't seen enough that has led me to believe that they're going to be anywhere close to, being knocked off their top step.
Yeah.
I haven't seen enough to lead me to believe that is in jeopardy.
Yeah. And in my opinion, it really is a toss-up, and it was hard for me to rack my brain around it. It really, for me, it really is a flip of a coin, or a wind gust or whatever. I really think if the wind blows a certain direction on a certain day, that'll determine, whether or not Ferrari or Red Bull wins the constructors.
Yeah, so that'll determine whether or not Charles spins off on his own in the French Grand Prix.
So for both, very similar reasons. For me, I think for you put less thought into it, but I put a lot more thought into trying to figure out. It's hard to say. But I had to pick one.
I do think it's going to be close, and I did put a lot of thought into it, and I just haven't seen enough from Ferrari to lead me to believe that they're going to be first, and I haven't seen enough from Red Bull to lead me to believe that they are, going to be taken down a peg.
Now, since 2017, the driver that wins the first race of the season always comes in second.
So if Max Verstappen wins the first race, he's not going to win the championship.
Yep.
Confirmed.
Yeah.
The first race curse. We'll see what happens.
Watch the first race. I don't know,
because in 2017 it was Sebastian Vettel.
Mm-hmm.
2018
also Sebastian Vettel.
2019 was Lewis Hamilton. No, it was Valtteri Bottas.
It was Valtteri won.
Valtteri Bottas won in 2019.
Got second.
2020 was Charles came in second at the first race because it was Austria. He got the only podium of the year. Well, no, Seb got a podium in Turkey. It was Max, Charles, and Lando in Austria in 2020 at the first race.
Yes.
But Charles didn't finish that high up in the but Max
Verstappen won the race.
But Lewis Hamilton won the championship. And then in 2021, Lewis Hamilton won the first race in Bahrain.
That's right.
And came in second in the championship.
Mm-hmm.
And last year Charles won the first race, came in second in the championship. So, who knows what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
But I still have Max Verstappen as world champion. I think he is going to be one of a very select few to go back 3 times for a world championship.
I put Ferrari as a constructors winner, but I also have Max Verstappen winning the championship.
2008 style.
I think Max Verstappen will win the championship, but I don't think Red Bull will win the constructors. And that's why I made the decision that I did, because I really think that it's going to come down to the second driver.
Yeah. I agree.
So I definitely think that Max Verstappen will win, because right now, you've already mentioned it, but at this current moment in time, Max is the best driver on the grid.
I agree. Yep. And he's the most consistent. It's hard to shake him.
It really is. He just I knew he was gonna. I had a feeling he was gonna win the championship. When Ferrari started to have their struggle and he started coming back, because he was the whole time with the double DNF in Bahrain and in Australia, the whole time he was still just as cool as a cucumber. It really seemed like he was well, they'll figure it out. We'll get it fixed.
The moment I knew was France. That Max Verstappen was going to win the championship.
Oh, I knew long before France.
I knew it was going to be France. Because at the time, I think Max was leading the championship, but Charles would have taken the lead back in the championship had he won that race. Because he had the fastest lap, and he was leading. He would have taken the lead in the championship back.
Yeah.
But that happened, and that was the moment I lost all hope. Was France in 2022.
I think I had lost hope way long before France.
But yeah, so that is everything except one last thing, is who we believe is going to be Rookie of the Year. We have 3 new rookies in Formula One, which is, for Formula One standards, that's a lot. That's a good number.
That's a lot. This is a good number. So the 3 rookies, before we say the 3 rookies, as a reminder, are Logan Sargent, Oscar Piastri, and Nick DeVries. I'll say I don't think it's going to be Logan Sargent, simply because he's in a Williams. I don't think he's going to do bad, but I think amongst the rookies, I think he's going to finish 3rd, just because he's with Williams.
I agree.
I'm going Nick DeVries as being Rookie of the Year, and I think Nick DeVries will be the top finishing rookie. Not to say that Oscar Piastri can't, but I have a little bit more faith in AlphaTauri than I do McLaren at the moment.
That's why I'm also going with Nick DeVries, but I think the thing with Nick DeVries and Oscar Piastri, it is really going to be about who bounces back. Like if McLaren can bounce back from the way that they're testing, if they can really bounce back, then I think there's no reason why Oscar Piastri can't win Rookie of the Year. But right now, as it stands, from everything that I've seen, I'm going to go Nick DeVries as well.
Yeah.
But I still think that all three rookies
They're going to do
very talented. They're all going to do well.
They seemed all three of them also seemed to settle in quite well in preseason testing. It didn't seem like any of them were struggling at all. They were able to get up to speed pretty quickly. And the other reason I also have Nick DeVries too is because he's won an FIA sanctioned world championship. Yes, Oscar Piastri won F2, but that winning F2 is not designated as being a world champion. Nick DeVries won the Formula E world title, so Nick DeVries is an FIA world champion already.
Yeah.
And that's why I have Nick DeVries over Oscar as well.
I think the other thing that I've seen a lot of people talk about is it being sort of a make or break season for some of the rookies, and I don't see that at all, because the reason why is because I think all of those rookies are good. I think they're going to do well. I don't think either of them are going to do so badly that in their first season they're going to get the boot.
Yeah.
And I also, with each of those teams, I don't see at the moment, I don't see a suitable replacement for any of those drivers. Unless Williams picks Mick up because of his time as a Mercedes reserve, and with James Vowles as team principal being a Mercedes personnel, and I think that drew Williams a lot closer in relationship to Mercedes. So unless they want to put Mick Schumacher in that car, I don't see anybody else taking the Williams drive. I don't see anybody wanting to go to McLaren right now based on how testing went, and I don't think that any of the Red Bull juniors are good enough right now to step up into AlphaTauri. The only exception being, I think, maybe Liam Lawson, if he has a really good F2 season. I don't think Yuri Vips is there. I don't. Liam Lawson is the only person that I would think that could come up from the junior ranks in Red Bull, but that's very dependent on how his Formula 2 season goes.
Yeah.
Which could be very good, because Oscar Piastri's not racing. Felipe Drugovich isn't racing anymore because he won the championship. Logan Sargent isn't racing anymore. I think that Teo Pourchaire and Liam Lawson are going to be two heavy-hitting favorites. And so if Liam Lawson can win the championship, then maybe put him in the AlphaTauri and see how he does. But other than that, I don't see any of those teams getting rid of those drivers. At the end of the year.
I don't think either. I don't think any of them will perform badly enough where the team needs to start looking at alternatives. I don't think any of them will do bad enough.
Nope. So those are our overall testing impressions and our preseason prediction. And I can tell you, we are just a week away. We are 8 days away from lights out.
So close.
And I cannot wait to get the season underway. Another Formula One season. It's been a really short off season, but it's felt like it has lasted forever.
I don't know. My work has been crazy for me, so it has felt like it has gone by like that. But I'm very, very excited for it to come back.
I think for me, the reason why it lasted so much longer is because Abu Dhabi in 2021 went into December.
That is true.
It was the second weekend in December. It was nearly Christmas time.
It was December 12th, I believe.
Yeah, it was nearly Christmas time when the race happened. And this year, it happened before the end of November. So we had a couple extra weeks of winter.
I think it was before Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So it was a couple weeks before winter. But yeah, I'm just so excited to have cars back on track. It is so nice to hear those mighty V6s roaring, even though sometimes I wish they were V8s.
Or V10s.
Anyway, we will be back I can't believe we get to say this. Our next episode will be a Grand Prix review episode. We will be back after the Bahrain Grand Prix to bring you everything that happened in the first week of the season. Until then, be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and let us know who you think is going to be world champion at the end of the year.